Give yourself permission to be the beginner. As the beginner, you can never fail because every step you take is success. There's this famous quote that says, life expands in proportion to one's courage. And I think it's actually life expands in proportion to one's permission.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are here with a really refreshing look at how to break out of stagnation in your life and how to get yourself to a place where you're happy, content, and fulfilled in your personal life and then also in your relationship.
Yeah, Emily was so amazing. She really inspired. She made me think a lot about, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? What does my life look like? And truly, as someone, I consider myself a big manifester, and I think there is always more work to do in creating the life of your dreams. And Emily was such an inspiration in that way. She even said, inspire, which I made her repeat at the end. What does that mean? It's in spirit, right? And it's just like being fully in connection with your spirit, with your spirituality. And where does that come from? Where does that stem from? And what brings you peace? Yeah,
and she talks about how it wasn't always like that for her. And so I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that it doesn't always feel amazing, but how do you get it back? How do you get yourself to a place where maybe you correct the road that you're on and fix the path and get yourself at least moving towards the goals that you really want to strive for instead of a place that maybe you kind of feel stuck in? And that really comes down to courage and having the willingness to leap. So I'm not gonna give it away, but I want you to hear how she had to take a leap and the lesson that she learned from that.
Yeah, and really just dreaming up her dream life with the universe, like in cahoots. And we talked about her new book called The Quest, which is all about asking questions.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I really, really loved in this interview is we talked about how, we mentioned this, in America, we're so much about focusing on the problem and going and fixing the problem. And Emily suggests something really cool as an alternative to that and actually gives you an exercise that you can put into use in your coupleship, in your relationship, maybe even with your friends, because you guys talk quite a bit about friendships and how this is a time of a lot of upheaval around relationships, not just COVID, but it seems like there's something going on right now where a lot of people are doing like these relationship detoxes almost.
Yeah, just cleansing what isn't in alignment, whether that be a work relationship, a career, friendships, girlfriends, husbands, wives, whatever it might be, really evaluating our friendships. And we talk about that, and that as painful as it always is, and it always is painful to let go, continuing to move towards that full alignment. And that comes from asking questions and continuing to always be on that quest for truth.
Yeah. And so in our quest to always bring you people that can enlighten you, ignite you, help you find your purpose, help you identify the path you want to live on, Emily does a great job. And, she's in this beautiful, you guys won't get to see much of the video. We'll release clips for you, though. She's like on some beautiful retreat in Costa Rica. So we can also all be jealous that she gets to do that.
And happy for her at the same time. Always.
Oh, yeah. And then also happy for her. Mm-hmm. I was looking at those video images. I'm like, I want to be hanging out by the beach.
We can create anything we want, honey.
Stay in place.
All right. Listen for this amazing interview, and please share with us any aha moments you have or anything you're feeling after it's done.
We'll be right back.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy Fix All That with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the conversation part of today's episode. We've got Emily Pereira with us. What's up, Emily?
Hello, how are you both? It's so lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for being here.
You look like you're in a very beautiful location.
Costa Rica, Santa Teresa. Have you been here?
We've been to Costa Rica, but not there. It's been a while. It's been about 10 years.
Maybe this is a sign.
Yeah.
It is beautiful, always was.
Well, like they said, my name is Emily Pereira, and I live here in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. I have founded a retreat and wellness center here called the Sunrise Mountain Retreat and Wellness Center. I'm an author. My first book came out last week. It's called The Quest: From the Hollywood Hills to the Amazon Jungle, One Woman's Search for Enough. And I'm also a coach that helps women call love into their lives. And I also work with couples as well that want to strengthen their connection.
Love it. So can you walk us through this concept of the search for enough?
Oh, yes. Well, I think that, I don't know from the male perspective, so you'll have to chime in on this, but I think for every woman, we rub up against this at some point. Are we enough? Is it enough? Chasing all of these different things, believing that those things are going to make us feel like we're enough. And this is, very much, as it's the tagline of my book, as it starts out on the first page, I'm heartbroken and I'm devastated because this life that I had that, was all of the things that society told me was going to bring me happiness had been stripped away from me in a moment when I found out that my boyfriend at the time, my live-in boyfriend of 6 years, cheated on me. And, at that point I had this high-flying career. He had just sold his company for nearly $500 million. We lived on the beach in LA, closet full of designer clothes, parties, events, and vacations, all of the stuff that I had sort of been programmed to believe would make me feel like I was enough, by the way that I was raised, 80s movies, even, parents, Sex and the City, these different messages that we receive. But for as amazing as that looked from the outside, there was this kind of constant churning of anxiety inside me. I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. And this is way before, Instagram and all these inspirational messages and the communication that's available now. So I didn't have too many resources. And so even though I wasn't totally fulfilled and happy in that life, I was getting so much external validation that I had made it at 27. And then when I found out that the man cheated on me right around the time I thought I was going to be getting the ring, it was like my whole world just crumbled before my eyes. And so much of what I identified with had just been stripped away. And I think it's really interesting because this book has taken me 10 years to kind of be burst to the world. And I kept wondering, why is this taking so long? And now I understand exactly why it needed to come out now. In November, after a seminal election, in the middle of a global pandemic, right when Mars is waking up from retrograde, because this book is all about the portal that opens in a time of great contraction. And it was in that moment I was feeling, it was a legit breakdown, okay, as far as I understand it, in my late 20s. And that was really when the quest began, because I connected with this powerful spiritual teacher who, back in those days may as well have been the Easter Bunny for all I knew. But I just knew I felt better in his presence, and he had information that I couldn't find in books and hands that could literally heal your body, which was news to me because I was working for the pharmaceutical industry. So, I spent the next 2 years really lifting myself up with, deep spiritual introspection, exploration. And after about 2 years' time, I decided to sit down as an experiment from my teacher. He said, write your story. It's going to heal your heart. You never have to show it to anybody. And at that point, I'd literally written just emails, I don't know, like the occasional thank you letter since college. That was just like, seemed really out of my wheelhouse. And I didn't think I was a creative person. That wasn't really fostered in me growing up. I was the athlete. I was adventurous. I was, kind of these other things, but creativity, that wasn't really my thing. And I was really surprised that by applying this new like radical shifts in perspective that I'd been learning, the words flowed freely. And before I knew it, I had a few sentences and then a few paragraphs and then a few pages and then a few chapters. And before I knew it, I wrote a 600-page book. And, the writing of that book completely transformed my life. And it was sort of like the first thing that knocked over, the dam, and it started rushing. And I started to play guitar and sing and write songs and paint paintings and dance burlesque and do improv and all of these things that I didn't know that the creative was so closely linked to the spiritual, and they sort of like move each other forward. And as I went along, I realized enough isn't really a place that we land. It's not really a finish line that we cross, but it's more like a field we can enter. And those creative things, like that act of inspiration, it brings us in, spirit in to the body. It allows us to become embodied, which allows us to be present. And I think in those moments, I've glimpsed enough.
I love it. I mean, I think you asked about the male perspective. I think for men, there are definitely achievements you have to hit. It's on like for your ex, like selling out a company or making millions of dollars or whatever the equivalent is, the car you drive, all that stuff, the women you're with, right? I mean, those are all little marks of whether you've made it or not. But in a really similar way to what you mentioned, there's a complete disconnect between reaching any of those milestones and feeling like you've made it. It normally actually works in reverse. It's like you have to feel like you're worthy of, and like you're 100% fine where you are right now, even as you're trying to grow. And it's from that space that all the achievements you have can then take on a completely different, nuanced feel that is, you can still have growth, right? You can be okay with where you are right now, feel totally complete where you are right now, and yet try to achieve growth. And it's a difficult balance, I think, sometimes. I think for men who are programmed to achieve and succeed and compete, because winning a race or selling your company or doing anything like that it's not the end goal. Like, you still have tomorrow to wake up to, and then what do you do on that day? And I think that all comes from inside.
I'm so happy you brought that up. I actually talk about that in the book, is like after he sells the company, because I was, so I wanted closure. I was so confused. I was so sad for so long after it all broke down, even though it wasn't that great. And the day, right after the company sold, he was so sad. And I was like, what's wrong? The plan was for us to take a year and go travel around the world. And then he didn't want to go anymore. And I was like, why don't you want to go? What's so wrong? And he says, I'm going to get behind. I'm like, behind who? And, this is, I'm like, we're in our late 20s. So yeah. And what I realized was, it was nobody's fault. Like what had happened was we were just the same unconscious people that we had been all along. I thought once the company sold, I would get like my funny, cute boyfriend back. We'd go traveling. Maybe I'd get the ring. And that was all supposed to make me feel like I was enough. And for him, it was supposed to be, I sold this company and these millions of dollars is going to make me feel like we were enough. And then the day after it happened, oh shit, we're just the same people we were yesterday. Yeah. And nothing's really different. So now, of course, I can look back on that experience as one of the greatest gifts of my entire life, because it put me on the spiritual path, which is, I think, our only chance of really feeling like we are enough is to go to that inner place inside where we can connect with self, where we can connect with source and find peace.
You said earlier something beautiful about a portal when you contract. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you repeat what you said?
Yeah, well, what I said was this book is all about the portal that opens in this time of great contraction. So what's happening on a global scale right now is that so much of what a lot of people identify with has been stripped away, right? So it's like we can't go out to like football games or, even careers, going out to parties and things like that, getting external validation for accomplishments, even what you're wearing, all of these things that we've sort of maybe unconsciously accepted along our path of life as meaning has been stripped away. And so many people are sitting here at this moment going like, what does this all mean? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? And really, that's the portal. The portal is starting to open, and that's that opportunity for us to start to go inward. So the idea of the quest, it's rooted in the idea of questions, right? So answers are finite, but questions are infinite. And when we start to ask questions, that's what leads us along the path that really starts to feel purposeful, that starts to feel meaningful.
And staying curious along the way in all of it. And that's what keeps you alive. I feel like when you stop being curious and stop asking questions, like you're kind of dying, right? Like,
absolutely. It's a big part of this story is about permission and giving yourself permission to go to the edge of your comfort zone. Because as cliche as that, like, meme that goes through the, feed, the magic does happen at the edge of the comfort zone, And so what I call her like this character now, because she's such a younger version of me. And I feel like I've lived 9 lifetimes since I wrote that book. But I really found that I didn't know that I wasn't giving myself permission. I didn't know that I was in a straitjacket of my own design. I mean, it wasn't really my own design. It was from the overarching culture that I had, bought into. But I was had my foot on the brakes of my life and I didn't even know it. And I didn't understand, I can give myself permission. I mean, one of the biggest wisdom bombs that was ever dropped on me was, you don't have to be perfect to participate. You just have to give yourself permission to be the beginner. The beginner's not supposed to know anything, so the beginner can never fail. And I was like, ding, 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 all the lights went off. And I started to see that it's sort of this equation that happens. It's like when we give ourselves permission, that allows us to access passions. Because I was so blocked, I didn't think I had passions. But really, I was just so afraid of not being perfect at those things. So giving myself permission to be the beginner opened up all these passions. And then I've really found passions are like a compass. They're no accident. They're like directing you, like, this is your purpose. This is your purpose. And I mean, passionate, purposeful living, there's nothing like it. That's a portal enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, so you support a lot of women, you were saying, in finding love.
Yes.
Or connecting to love or being more intimate in their love. How do you find, I mean, obviously if people find you to do the work with you, they at least have curiosity about this idea, right? They're no longer in the place where they haven't considered questioning because they're starting to look for answers outside of the typical men are from Mars, women are from Venus sort of answer we get. What kind of work do you do with women to bring in that curiosity, bring in that open-mindedness, get them to explore things that maybe they never thought were part of their quest, their journey?
Oh my gosh, that's like one of my favorite parts about the work. Coaching in general, I approach a little bit differently than the traditional approach, because the traditional approach sometimes, this idea of, okay, let's find out where the problems are, let's find out what's wrong and let's fix it. That can actually tend to separate couples, and that can tend to separate individuals from their power as well. So I work within something that's called the gateless framework. And this is this methodology that I teach, in my courses and also my private coaching clients. And gateless is an old Zen saying that means when conditioning falls away. And so what we do first is we look at what's working. What has power? What has strength? What has energy? So this is the opposite of where many of us have been trained, is to sort of look to fix the couple or the issue in front of us. And so in the gateless framework, we flip this around and we talk about what's working in a really visceral and embodied way. So for instance, like if you came to me looking for love, I would first ask you, where do you value yourself? What's working in your life right now? Where are your strengths? Where do you feel powerful? Where do you feel beautiful? We have this part of the brain called the reticular activating system. You may be familiar with it. I know you're a doctor, but it amplifies whatever gets attention. So it's like this really great employee. Whatever you give it, it's just going to take it and run with it. So if we're constantly looking for issues and problems, we're going to start to see, issues and problems everywhere. This is kind of one of those things, you're like, you set an intention that you want to go cross country in a, airstream, and all of a sudden you start seeing airstreams everywhere. And then an airstream, pops up right in your neighborhood. That's really the brain science behind manifesting. And so by focusing on what has power, what has strength, what has energy, we start to create a shift really quickly. And as like attracts like. So all of a sudden, women start to see, they're on a new horizon, and suddenly like men are hiding in plain sight are suddenly paying attention to them, or they're getting invitations that they weren't getting invitations to before. So that sort of like kickstarts things, which is really cool, because then they start to trust. They're like, okay, there's something here, because I'm starting to see physical manifestations pretty quickly. And then the second part of the gateless methodology is to really offer the person tools and resources. Don't you just love that word resource? It's like going back to source. So, rather than, telling you something's wrong with you and here's how you fix it, I pass them tools and resources, anything from, journaling to ecstatic dance, breath work, meditation. I'm here doing my sound healing training, but in my retreats that I do, I've brought in sound healers for many years, and I'm super passionate about that methodology. So what I find these practices to do is they're like a bridge. They're a bridge bringing spirit into body, connecting you with your higher self, that self that knows, that self that trusts, that self that does have a strong idea of why they're here and what their purpose is. And I feel that brings women such confidence to know, like, I'm here for a reason. I have things to do, something to offer. And, then with those challenges that are left, the post-trauma challenges, the serious stuff that sticks, the trust issues, scarcity mentality, that kind of stuff. What we do, like the genius of this gateless method, is we flip that on its head too, and we find the gift. We find the gift in that situation, because then we're no longer vibrating as victims. And, if you get a gift, how do you feel? Grateful, right? So then we're back in that gratitude, which is, the fundamental building block for all manifestation. So then again, awesome things start to come into the orb where things were kind of stuck and stagnant before.
Yeah, I love this. I talk about this a lot on here, but I start every morning with a gratitude practice, and it's at least partially just to reorient my head, to have to think a little bit about what it's grateful for, instead of the default that my brain normally goes into, which is everything I have to fix or worry about. And so just by allowing yourself to first go, hey, what am I really into? What am I really excited about? Even about myself, if you're struggling with that right now, or about my relationship, if that's a place of struggle, can be a really beautiful place to bring in attention into the elements that are working, the elements that are powerful, the elements that are feeding you and making life better, instead of always looking for what is still missing.
Isn't it so powerful? And something I've tuned into in the past maybe 5 years that really stepped it up a notch. It's like gratitude with Sophie's Philosophy Superfoods on top, is adding the why. So like, for instance, let's say you have something on your gratitude list. For me, it's my nanny, because I have 2 young children. And as you know, with 3 children, it's a circus. And so having somebody that I love and trust, that's like part of our family, that can give me support. Well, the why is, I can do work that's deeply meaningful to me, and I can earn a living, which allows me to buy organic food and travel. It allows me to go surfing every morning and connect with the ocean and myself. So you follow that braid down of the why. And by like item 5 or 6, I feel like I'm in a totally different vibrational frequency. You're just like, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I love the idea of just empowering couples, empowering women. Like, a lot of people have this negative connotation with therapy or healers and think like, oh, I must be deeply flawed if I have to go see someone. So there's that stigma and shame, even going into a session to begin with. So I love that focusing, no matter what it is, focusing on what's working, and then empowering the person or the couple to really have awareness of what is. And what is that, like, there's a lot of love here. There's a lot of goodness. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of challenges. And within the challenges is those gifts. And starting out the conversation that way then empowers the couple to, again, see from a different perspective and have awareness of, there's actually a lot of good here. Let's see it for what it is. And I think a lot of times, me included, when something small or big goes wrong, that's all you can feel and see is the thing that's wrong. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, things haven't been working for a long time. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah.
You go down that spiral when you start focusing that way, isn't
it? Exactly. When in reality, it's like, well, No, we had amazing, passionate sex 3 days ago. And we went away last weekend to this amazing place. Like when you start focusing on the good, then that's what you actually see. And that's what you start to manifest more of.
And I think it's so important in long-term relationships because especially when there's so many different elements, if you have businesses together and children together and all of these things can really, kind of build up. And so we just have that choice. And it's like it's like brushing your teeth. You've got to redo it again and again and again.
I love
and with
that.
the women that I work with, I tell them, I think about it like this. It's like, imagine you're wearing the most gorgeous gold sparkly dress and you feel so gorgeous and so sensual and so attractive and so confident in this dress. And then somebody comes around and says, oh, did you hear it's going to be kind of cold later? Maybe you should put on this jacket. So you put on the jacket. And then someone else like, oh no, it's going to snow. So then you're like, oh shit, I got to put on my parka. And then someone else like, high winds coming around the corner. And so you put on a windbreaker. So all of a sudden you don't see the gold dress. Nobody else sees the gold dress. This is how we've been parented by the patriarchy. And when I say patriarchy, let me be clear. It's not the divine masculine, which I'm very much in reverence to, but the patriarchy, which affects both men and women. And so it's these false messages and beliefs that we've, that have built up over the course of our lifetime. And so a large part of the work that I do is let's rip off those jackets so you can see that gold sparkly dress. Let's find where your magic lives and amplify it. Because when your light is on and your magic, that's when other people see it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this with our new couples therapist just the other day. I'm not a really jealous guy in relationships and haven't been, but we were talking and Sophie and I know a lot of women, the numbers that are thrown around is something like 20% of women have been raped or sexually assaulted. I think, unfortunately, the numbers are way, way, way higher than that. I mean, it just depends, I guess, on your definition of a sexual assault. But to me, inappropriate touching and even, putting somebody in an incredibly uncomfortable situation, I think way more than 50% of women that I know have been in situations like that. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of that. Let me put on my defensive armor in whatever forms it comes in. And so we talk. I mean, Sophie and I talk about it quite a bit. We talked about it with a therapist. We've mentioned it a few times on this podcast. When you can get somebody to a place, to a state where they don't feel the encumbrance, they don't feel the boundaries and the barriers and that armor anymore, and they get to actually be themselves, it's a really beautiful thing to watch. And it doesn't create fear, and it doesn't, unless the other partner is also lacking in confidence, but it's actually just really, really amazing to see your partner get to this really safe, even not empowered, like self-love, fully appreciative version of themselves. And it's almost, the sad thing to me is almost to see it go back, like to see the armor and the jacket go back on, right? It's like you get these glimpses, you get these moments of pure freedom, and then you go back out into the world and the winds come and the cold comes. And so a lot of times it gets easier, or at least it feels safer to put the armor back. I guess that's one of the reasons to move to Costa Rica is you're not surrounded by all these cues and triggers that make us all hide again.
Yeah, which is why we go on vacation, which is why we pick to go to places, at least for me, I go places where I can live in a bikini all day long and not be judged. I go to places where I don't need to wear makeup because why would I? I go to places where my kids can run around naked on the beach because why wouldn't they? Like all these things, healthy, beautiful foods, like that's what I crave when I travel, because that's what I crave in my life. And feet in the earth, feet in the sand. And you've created a whole reality around that, which is aligned with what you're trying to call in and what you are living and breathing.
Yes. So I was in Los Angeles for 15 years and I started leading retreats while I was there. I lead a retreat called the Mermaid Sisterhood. And I was on retreat on the last day, sitting on my surfboard, and the sky was just exploding in this gorgeous sunset. And I was so high from the week with all the ladies. And I I just whispered to the wind and I was like, I don't know how and I don't know when, but I'm going to live here someday. And it felt like kind of cheesy, but it also felt so right. And then fast forward, I think it was like 3.5 or 4 months later. It was right before my 38th birthday and I didn't really have anything going on. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to Costa Rica. I'm going to go back to this one town I remember loving the most that I traveled through when I was 23 years old. And I just came on a solo trip for 3 weeks to surf and to write. And just going into the third week, I was walking to go surfing and I met this charming Frenchman on the path to go surfing. And he said, how does it look? And I've been like sitting there in indecision for 15 minutes, terrified because it was super windy. And I was like on one shoulder, it was the angel, like, you got this, girl, be the beginner. And on the other side, it's like, you're going to die. And this guy comes up and there's no one else out there. And this guy comes up and he's like, how does it look? And I was like, oh, a little windy, like trying to play it kind of cool. He's like, I think it would be good. And something about the way he said that sort of like made me feel like he was inviting me to come with him. So I trailed behind him. And that surf date turned into a dinner date that turned into an invitation to do ayahuasca a couple of days later, that turned into an invitation to take a surf trip all around the country. And now we're here with 2 babies and a retreat center. And
I love that.
Wild adventure. I had that moment. And actually I always tell this story because I think it's so funny, but he dropped me off at the Puerto Jimenez airport, which is this like tiny satellite airport that you take back to, it's like a puddle jumper that you take back to the capital. And his English was really not that good at the time. Like we were speaking kind of this like mix of like Spanish, Franglish. And he's like, darling, I know from when I work in the restaurant, the man say, I have the chocolate cake. The man know exactly what he wants. The woman say, I have the chocolate cake. Oh, no, I want the ice cream. And as you're walking away, she say, wait, I want the pineapple thing. So I know the woman, she changed her mind. So you go home, you think about it, you come back, we make a baby.
Oh
and that was after like 2.5 weeks. I'm like, getting to the point. And I sort of couldn't take him seriously because I'd been kind of jaded by some like LA experiences. And I kind of just was like, I didn't really know what to think, but I went back to my little bungalow in Venice, which was beautiful. And I had lovely friends and I had a lot going on that was, great. But I just sat on my couch with all my nice things I'd been collecting for the past 15 years. And I said, I want the adventure. I want like the salt water in my hair. I want the back of the motorcycle barefoot. I want sunrise surfs. And so I didn't know if he was going to be like my guy, but at the very least, he would be a beautiful catalyst and an important lesson. And at the best, he would be my guy. And here we are. It's been 5 years since that moment in February. And I'm so happy that I took that leap, as where I am now with my life, this lifestyle is much more aligned with the truth of who I am. Although I loved LA.
It's so beautiful. And I think, I love to approach situations like that of like choices, even when I'm giving like advice to my best friends and they're like, but should I go out with him again? Or what do you think? But it's not just like being a yes person. It's what do you have to lose right now? And weighing that and saying like, worst case scenario, you go on some amazing dates, you have great adventures, have great sex potentially, and then he's not your person, but you get to learn about yourself. And so usually when I like make decisions for myself, it's that same thing. Like, what's the worst case scenario? It's better than sitting on my ass. Like,
totally.
You knew what you were having in Venice in your bungalow with your great friends. Like, you know that life. We only live once as far as we know. So
you can also always, I know you mentioned the whole thing about the cake, but you also get to move to Costa Rica and go, oh shit, I actually don't like this. Let me go back to Venice.
I was wrong.
People always act like the next choice is the only choice you get to make. And they forget about all the other times they made choices and then backed out and it was all good, right? I think you mentioned this before about this perfectionistic nature. And so many people we work with, so many people I work with, so many people in my life in general always feel like the next decision has to be the right decision, even though it would be hard for me to count how many wrong decisions I've made in my life.
But they led you here, so they're not wrong, right?
Yes. You learn and you move on. Like it's always, every experience will give you an opportunity to learn something. If you stay in...
That's exactly what the quest is about. It turns life into a grand adventure, not some test we have to pass.
So I have a specific question. I was just really thinking about this because you talked about some tactics. we love stories from people that we've worked with. I'd love to hear about maybe some specific stories of either women or couples where you did some technique, you asked a question in a certain way, and somebody's mind just got blown and they had a completely different experience than they ever had before.
Okay, so one of the techniques that I use with couples, I have a 5-week program that I do with couples. And, this was this couple that they'd been doing therapy, and they were a good couple. They were a solid couple. They weren't like, major problems, but they're mindful and conscious couple, and they want to be working on their relationship. So they've been in therapy for a long time. And the woman had come on my retreat, and she's like, can you do something with us together as a couple? And I said, of course. So I took them through the journey of their love story, and really like that ancient place where they fell in love. They've been together for over 10 years. And what we did was, through the different 5 weeks, I took them on this journey, and I took them into meditation, and then I gave them a writing prompt. And each week there was a different writing prompt, and then they would each go separate. They were like on their own Zoom in different parts of the house, and they would write out the prompt. And so the first week was talk about the first time you met, and like how your love story got started and everything like this. So they each tell it. And then we take them all the way through the journey of their love story, and also to like back to like their different families, and also what they want to create, what their biggest fantasy is. So we go through all these different parts, but each session they write, and then they share what they wrote. And then here's, again, we bring in the gateless method. They comment on each other's. I also comment on theirs, but they only talk about what works about the work, what has power, what has strength, what has energy. And so not only does this just feel like a love bath for you and your creativity, but this is huge connective, because you're getting to kind of see yourself through their eyes in a really intimate way that maybe isn't always so shared. I mean, I swear at the end of each session, it was like, get a room, like real quick. They were just like, and she told me, she goes, we never feel this way after therapy. Like, we're just like, and then in between the sessions, they'd have little kind of exercises and practices that were, just simple things that, if he usually cooks, she cooks. If, walk down the street for 10 minutes holding hands. Today is all about doing something, making the other person laugh. So it'd be these different little things where you take time out of your busy life and do something mindful and a little bit different. And she's like, that brought us closer than we've been together in years. And they signed up for another 5 weeks.
Love it.
Yeah, I huge transformation actually doesn't need to be so complicated as what I found. It's just really taking it out of that old model of there's a problem here, let's fix it, let's focus to the problem, and let's focus to where there's power and strength. Does so much for a connection between two people.
I love that.
I think we also just get into, for a D and I speaking personally, like we just get into patterns. We just get into a pattern. It's not a bad pattern. It's just a pattern. And then we're both bored with the pattern. Nothing like, I always think about this time where my hair, like I always wore it straight in college. And then one day, like I just wore it wavy, and Adi was like, what did you do to your hair? It looks amazing. I just made it curly. Like there's nothing, I didn't cut it. I didn't color it. It's the same hair. I just actually have naturally wavy hair, so I can go either direction. And we just like nuance. We just like freshness. And there's nothing wrong with the way we do things, but sometimes we want to go to that. And we talk about this a lot in our own stuff within Ignited, is just like keeping that spark alive, is switching things up and doing things differently and changing that hardwire and changing that patterning, and that being in the passenger seat and being a co-pilot, like just going with the flow of what you normally would do and the way you would talk to each other and address each other, and just keeping it fresh. Like we've been together 16 years and we are obsessed with each other and obsessed with our love, and we don't want to be with anyone else. And sometimes it gets a little dull, and that's okay. And so how do you see each other differently, get that spark going? Like it doesn't take much for us. Like we get butterflies after like one shift or change. Like we know it works.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be complicated. We just have to do it.
And sometimes we need a challenge. Sometimes we need to hire a therapist or hire a healer or hire a 5-week course. That's important for any relationships or anyone, even on your own. It doesn't mean that you're in a troubled place. Adi and I are in the best time of our relationship. We're at the prime of our relationship, and yet we want more.
Oh, absolutely. I think if anyone's doing this work, you start to understand where you expand, the light comes in. And that's what feels so good. I mean, I've been working with my own coaches and mystics and healers for, how many years now? Like, we're going on 14 years, and I have no intention of ever stopping. I love having teachers. I love having guides. Why not always be learning?
Always.
I really think relationship, like long-term relationship, is like a potluck dinner, right? So if you are at your potluck dinner and you've eaten everything, or you show up and you don't have anything to give, the relationship's going to starve. So we have to go out into our own individual lives and rev those passions, have our own experiences too of expansion. So we have something to bring back into the relationship to feast on as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love this. And I love this concept of bringing the focus onto the positive, so often. One person can be more interested in expanding and going and focusing on the struggle, and then it can turn the other person off, right? Because if all you want to talk about is everything that's not working, even as life is pretty good, sometimes it's not surprising why your partner isn't like, yay, great, let's go to another therapy session where we're going to talk about everything that's not working out. I love this perspective of just shifting into the positive. Very cool. Yeah.
It's really a game changer, and it's a game changer too for creativity. I do this writing thing on my retreats, and people who are like, I'm not a writer, I don't feel creative, have gone on to write multiple books. Because anytime, the creative brain science studies show that anytime we feel judged, we're going to recoil, and actually the parts of our brain that are responsible for memory recall, imagination, and creativity, they shut down. So, less than 1% of people who take traditional MFA writing courses go on to be published authors. That's crazy. Like, if that was medicine or if that was engineering, they'd be like, what's going on there? So they started looking and doing deeper studies, and they found that those traditional MFA writing courses are heavily rooted in critique. What isn't working? Let's sit around and talk about what's not working. Let's fix it. Well, the work just gets worse and worse and worse because of their activating system. So they started doing studies. What happens if we just focus to what has power, what has energy, what, has strength? And they found kids skipped grades, and the gateless writing method has more published authors than any other authors. And it's just, for me, day 1 to day 5 of the retreat, people don't recognize themselves. I mean, they don't recognize the writing. I know this is going to happen, but it always shocks the hell out of me when it does.
I love it. I love it. So, so cool. We have 5 questions we ask all of our guests, and I think I've been doing this recently, and I kind of like the way it ends up working out. So I'd love for you to think about these from this enlightened, positive perspective on relationships, kind of quest way of thinking about the world.
Okay.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I actually already shared it with you. Give yourself permission to be the beginner. As the beginner, you can never fail because every step you take is success. There's this famous quote that says, life expands in proportion to one's courage. And I think it's actually life expands in proportion to one's permission.
I love it.
Now, we know the magic's at the end of the comfort zone. How do we get to the edge? You give yourself permission to be the beginner.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. What about one of your proudest moments, maybe in this work on your own solo journey or with clients?
I think my proudest moment is just being able to dust myself off of really just horrible heartbreak and breakdown and begin again. And, and then I had, after that breakup, I got married and he left me, and I was able to begin again and realizing life is not a test to pass. It is an adventure to be had. And the way that you continue to land on the next horizon again and again and again is by taking personal responsibility, saying, why am I creating this? Where's the gift? Because that allows you to not stay stuck, to not stay stagnant. And people always go, I don't know how the heck you do this. Like, you've had 9 lives and they keep getting better. And from some really kind of awful situations that some people could have just gotten stuck in. And I think that really it's just being able to begin again, and, calling in my man and my 2 little babies was pretty exciting too.
It's beautiful. On the flip side of that, and again, the same sort of perspective Sophie was talking about, what have been your hardest moments?
definitely letting go of relationships that are no longer aligned. I think that's the hardest part of the spiritual path, is just realizing you're not wrong, I'm not wrong, we're just not aligned on this journey to be navigating together at this time. And sometimes you have to let go, but you still just love that person. And for me personally, it's actually been more girlfriends than even men. I don't even remember the men barely, but it's the women,
It's hard. It's hard. I talk about that a lot, and people on this, they're like, please do a full podcast on this. Like it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you want to make it work and you love that person and like a role that they played in your life, but it doesn't mean that you're aligned to go to the next step together. And that can be hard. And that doesn't mean that I have plenty of friends where we've found each other again after the breakup, like years later. And and we have now a different dynamic and a different friendship, but they did the work. I did the work separately for ourselves. And then we found each other again. And that's
beautiful
magic.
When that happens. Yes.
What about, especially with this work, we work with couples, we work, in this place of helping others heal. What are some of your self-care rituals that you keep yourself aligned so that you can really be that vessel and help people?
So many things. Well, my tried and true, which has made the biggest difference in my entire life, is eating fruit until noon every day. Fruit until noon. I had a chronic illness in my late 30s that lasted for years. And I tried all sorts of everything. And I ended up healing my body completely with raw fruits and vegetables and herbs. And now I'm fine and can eat whatever. But one thing that stayed with me is eating fruit until noon. And it gives me so much energy and so much optimism. And during that time, I got down to 79 pounds when I was cleansing. And so I started to really notice exactly the effect like a food has on my brain. And I realized that fruit until noon just gives you just that sparkling vitality. I mean, I'm in my 40s and I feel like I have more energy than I did when I was 7. So fruit until noon's my like game changer. And then I am a writer and I love writing and I feel like I just detox in writing. So a combination of creative writing and also the gratitudes I do daily as well, with the why. Surfing is that's a large part of the reason that I moved here, that I wanted to move here. So just connecting with the ocean, I feel like surfing is the ultimate spiritual practice, such a metaphor for life, for being present, for going with the flow, not controlling, trusting, being soft, not forcing anything. I mean, it's like there's so many benefits to surfing that just helped me so much come out of the ocean on such a high.
Yeah, it's meditation and nature and lessons and the wild. It's just the wild sea.
Oh my gosh. I feel like these days my house, I'm not at my house right now, but my house doesn't have walls. We don't have walls on our living room and kitchen. And so it's just that veil between us and nature is not there anymore. And in some ways it's challenging, I'm like, oh, now we're back to this, beetle bug season, or like you really notice all the insects that are coming like every 2 weeks. But I feel like now nature has just become my ultimate spiritual teacher. I just watch and observe and it's so wise and there's so many learnings.
And if anyone's listening, just go for a walk out in the woods or wherever you are on the beach. Just walk for 10 minutes. The gifts are there. Look up, look at the birds, it's everywhere. I have to remind myself constantly because we live in the city and I'm like, there were just 2 eagles. Like why, how have I not looked up in 3 days? Like, what is wrong with me? Last night, they saw a partial lunar eclipse from our hot tub last night. Just like, nature is always there giving us signals and beauty.
And it's such a great place to resource yourself too, when you're having a hard moment. Because I look out at those trees that have like been through hurricanes and been through all these crazy things, and they're still there. They're still growing, and even in like really unusual places where like the arm of a tree has been cut off, there'll be like another little bud coming out, and it's just like life wants to happen. So nature's just the ultimate teacher to show us that we can regenerate and rejuvenate ourselves again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the passion. I hear the passion you're speaking. This podcast is called Ignited. What ignites you?
Oh my gosh. I think doing things that scare me a little bit. I think that's where I always expand, just that edge of the comfort zone. I mean, even here, I'm here at the sound healing. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, learning. But if it's that, or if it's dropping it off a wave, if it's publishing a book about my life that's like so vulnerable, sometimes I'm like, for years, I would like wake up in the middle of the night, standing on the top of a glass building in the middle of Times Square with no clothes on and everybody looking up, but I'm doing it anyways. So, yeah, I think that's why, I'm a surfer. I think that's all surfers are just drawn to that kind of like, every day it's different. Every day it's scary. My little girl, I'm trying to get her excited about surfing. And she's like, I'm scared of the ocean. I'm like, so am I. Yeah. So is every surfer. So yeah, doing things that scare me a little bit.
Thank you. I mean, conversations like this ignite us, and, our listeners just love all of this juicy information. So thank you for your work and for living your truth. It really does inspire. And I loved what you said about inspiration. Like I actually had never heard it in that way. Can you say that part again?
Inspiration is coming in spirit, coming into body. And so I found in those moments when we're inspired, it's like the heavy past falls away. The fear of the future evaporates. We're here in the now, and you feel connected to who you are and why you're here. And that's when you can enter that field of enough.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And we'll have links to everything, your book and you and all of your services and offerings in the show notes. So thank you so much.
To drop in with you. Please come visit us in Costa Rica. Be our guest.
We will.
I know that our children would love each other.
Can't wait.
Done.
We loved Costa Rica last time. And for those of you listening right now, again, I always ask you, take a screenshot of this. Obviously subscribe to the podcast, but take a screenshot of this and share with us your lessons. One of the things that ignites us is listening in and knowing from you all what landed and maybe what you want to know more of. So we'd love to hear that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.